From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. The Bolivarian National Guard of Venezuela has held a military exercise in Caracas. President Nicolas Maduro welcomed the military that once again reaffirmed its loyalty to him and the government of Venezuela. This event is part of the preparations for the bicentennial civic military operation of Angostura that will take place between February 10th to 15th. For the first time, the event will be held in honor of Simón Bolívar and the 1821 Congress of Angostura, which contributed to the independence of Venezuela.
The recent chain of social, political and public events push us from simply guaranteeing citizens' safety to ensuring national peace, sovereignty, prosperity and development in this country. The Bolivarian National Guard of Venezuela is the backbone of our union's integrity.
And supporters of President Maduro have taken to the streets across cities in the states of Miranda and Carabobo to oppose foreign intervention. The president of the National Constituent Assembly joined the demonstration in Carabobo, where he reaffirmed Venezuela will not allow any foreign intervention or a coup attempt.
The United States wants to invade us. They clearly want to do this, and a good part of the European Union is helping them to achieve this. Colombia is also helping them to achieve this, the Colombian government and the Brazilian government. But they haven't thought of something, that this nation is also fighting, that this nation with its military won't accept anyone or anything, that this nation says that we are free, that this nation won't give up.
And in the country is business as usual, despite the mainstream media reporting of unrest. The streets of Caracas are calm as Venezuelans carry out their daily tasks, despite news that violent acts are happening every day. These are images from the La Pastora neighborhood. On Thursday, oil workers in Venezuela led what they called a great anti-imperialist march to demand respect for self-determination. Our correspondent reports from Caracas.
Speaking in one voice, workers of the state on PDVSA made clear their anti-imperialist position. They called attention of U.S. plans to dismantle the Venezuelan constitution.
We are a sovereign people, and we decide that Nicolas Maduro will be our president, because sovereignty resides in the people.
Protesters say the embargo imposed by Donald Trump's government against the oil subsidiary Citgo reveals their neoliberal intentions. The new U.S. sanctions will block $7 billion in Venezuelan goods and $11 billion in oil exports for the year 2019.
Today we can see how the U.S. aims to snatch our wealth. Today the world sees how the USA has lowered its mask, and we can see that the whole world supports the Venezuelan people.
The Venezuelan government continues to raise its voice to denounce the attempted coup d'etat that is being carried out in the nation. President Nicolas Maduro has urged dialogue and respect for the constitution and has denounced the U.S. intentions to appropriate Venezuela's wealth. Venezuelans say they want to live in peace and stop the intervention.
The Secretary General of the United Nations has again emphasized his commitment to peace and dialogue in Venezuela. Through his spokesman, Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the UN recognizes the elected government of Venezuela. Guterres added that his officers are ready to assist in achieving a political solution to the situation in the Latin American country.
The Secretary General reiterated that what he's already said publicly in his letter, which is basically his concern regarding the crisis in the country and the impact that it is having with the Venezuelan people. He said the United Nations is ready to increase its activities in Venezuela in the areas of humanitarian assistance and development. However, he said that for this, the United Nations needs the consent and the cooperation of the government. The Secretary General again underscored that recognizing governments is not for the Secretariat and for member states, and he noted that his relations with member states, he respects decisions taken particularly by the General Assembly and the Security Council, and he reiterated in his letter the availability of his good offices to help find a political solution to the crisis.
And a UN human rights expert has rejected the U.S. sanctions against Venezuela. Idris Jaisari has warned that the measures can lead to starvation and medical shortages. He says the sanctions are adding to the crisis and are a violation of international law. And Venezuela's ambassador to South Africa says it's comforting to have allies in Africa in the wake of political tension fueled by the United States and its allies. Our correspondent Matuba Malachie has the story.
The political tensions in Venezuela have gone beyond the country's borders, with nations expressing support for President Nicolas Maduro. The support comes against a wave of disapproval from the United States and its allies. Venezuela's foreign mission in South Africa says there's an attempted coup in Venezuela.
This is a coup d'etat. This is a coup d'etat in development in Venezuela in this moment, with United States in front of the coup d'etat, and with the leader of the opposition in this moment, Juan Guaido, of the United States. And unfortunately, some countries in Latin America follow them.
The head of the Venezuela's mission in South Africa says attempts by the United States to destabilize Latin America is a pattern that reminds her of other regions where the U.S. got involved in domestic politics.
This was the same in Iraq, was the same in Libya, in all the countries that when U.S. intervened. It's the same plan.
When asked why the United States was keen on removing the current government in Venezuela, she says the reasons are no secret.
The response is simple: our natural resources. Our natural resources and the political difference between Trump and Nicolas Maduro. But also is the same difference with the Commander Chavez. The problem is we are a democratic government walking to socialism, and we have a lot of natural resources.
Ambassador Moreno Marida lamented that mainstream media did not cover the Venezuela story objectively, and this, she says, causes even more tensions.
The media only show the information the information of the opposition, and it's not true. And yesterday I spoke with one journalist here, and I asked him why you didn't show the images in Venezuela with the people in support of our President Nicolas Maduro.
Venezuela's government believes it's the overwhelming sanctions from the supporters of self-proclaimed President Juan Guaido that are worsening the situation. Matuba Mahlachi, Telesur, Pretoria.
Supporters of Maduro have held a demonstration in Barcelona. Protesters gathered outside the European Union headquarters in the city after the body recognized Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido as interim president. Representatives of the pro-Catalan independence CUP party, Maria Sirvent, said that the people of Venezuela have already voted and that there must be respect for that result.
We are here to condemn all international interference against the sovereignty of the people of Venezuela. We understand that it is a question of democratic legitimacy and that the people have decided and therefore must respect the sovereignty of the people.
And in London, pacifist groups and trade unions organized an emergency rally to show their support and solidarity with the Venezuelan government. Hundreds of people gathered at the headquarters of the National Education Union to reject Guaido's claims to be interim president and the U.S. intervention in Venezuela.
Where are you from?
Grenada citizens also staged a demonstration at the Venezuelan embassy to express their solidarity. They're calling for the protection of the Caribbean as a zone of peace and for respect for Venezuela's sovereignty. The U.S. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard has said her country is headed down a dangerous path with regards to intervening Venezuela. Gabbard said the United States needs to stay out of the country and let the Venezuelan people determine their own future.
But the United States should not be in the business of intervening, of picking who should lead their country, and we certainly should not be threatening military action. Venezuela poses no threat to the United States. Congress has not authorized the United States to go to war in Venezuela, and there's no justification for our country to violate the sovereignty of the Venezuelan people.
But the U.S. continues threatening the Venezuelan government. The National Security Advisor John Bolton says Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro could end up in the Guantanamo prison complex if he doesn't leave power. During a radio interview, Bolton advised Maduro to have a, quote, long and quiet retirement on a beautiful beach far away from Venezuela. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Residents in the Brazilian town of Brumadinho have held a mass for the victims of the dam collapse. Holding candles, they prayed for the victims and their relatives. At least 110 people died and 238 remain missing. Only 71 victims have been identified so far. The environmental impact in the area is still being evaluated. Residents along the river banks say the fish they relied on for food are floating dead to the surface. And victims of the tragedy are urging authorities to help put an end all their means to stop the pollution. The contamination has extended for 650 kilometers along the Paraopeba River. The Vale Dam collapse is now considered Brazil's worst ever industrial accident.
I want them to pay me quickly because I had my house, my animals, and I lost everything. So it's not hard for them to come up with those 11 billion or 6 billion that's going around on television. What they expect from them. I don't know who the money that's been seized belongs to, but the authorities need to come and give me what is right for me. And for the families who have lost their homes, those families that have lost their loved ones, and everyone.
And also in Brazil, thousands of indigenous people and their supporters took to the streets on Thursday in 15 cities across the country. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Mir, was there and brings us this story.
January 31st was marked by protests for Brazilian indigenous rights in cities across Brazil as people took to the streets to protest a new wave of aggression and denial of rights by the far right-wing government of Jair Bolsonaro.
We are here, united, as various different peoples and ethnic groups from different regions in an attempt to resist what this government is trying to do.
In São Paulo, a crowd gathered under the MASP Modern Art Museum on Paulista Avenue to protest President Bolsonaro's new policies, including his decree that passed jurisdiction over indigenous reservations to the Ministry of Agriculture, which is dominated by the same ranchers and agribusiness interests that have been stealing indigenous people's lands for centuries.
Peace. We want peace. We want our place where we can live without these people who want to massacre Indian and to take away our peace. We want nothing more than this. We don't want a lot of things in life. We want our place. All we are asking for is peace and our place to live.
At a time when hate speech, violence, and land grabs against indigenous people are increasing in Brazil, thousands of people came out in an act of solidarity with the indigenous population.
We are here today to show that wherever there is an Indian who is still breathing, our culture will not die. So we are here today in the struggle, resisting like always.
Brian Mir, Telesur, São Paulo.
Human rights defenders in Colombia continue to denounce the systematic murder of social leaders. Our correspondent in Bogotá, Tatiana Portela, has more.
The murders of social and community leaders continue in Colombia. This week, 2 more leaders were killed. Delio Corpus Gietio, who was a trade unionist and part of the Campesino Guard, was killed on the streets of Santa Barbara in the department of Cauca. Also murdered was Jose Jair Orozco, who was developing many housing projects for vulnerable communities in the north of the Valley of Cauca. Since President Ivan Duque took power, at least 102 social leaders have been murdered, and 460 have been murdered since the peace agreement. On Wednesday, Duque's government called on the National Commission for Security Guarantees to protect the leaders and to disarm the criminal groups killing these people. However, during a news conference Thursday, it was announced that the functions of the commission will be relegated to the Action Plan for Prevention and Protection, or PAO. But this was rejected by social organizations because they say that the PAO does not have the structural tools that were outlined in the peace agreement. They also say it delegitimizes the National Commission for Security Guarantees. Another issue is that the PAO will be under the control of a retired soldier who has allegedly been linked to extrajudicial executions, crimes that took the lives of more than 10,000 young people in Colombia.
We thank Tatiana for that report. Ahead of Sunday's elections in El Salvador, the Electoral Court has been distributing electoral packages in the country's 14 regions. Let's take a look at the preparations in this report from our correspondent.
The 19 municipalities of San Salvador are receiving the electoral material, which will be distributed at the polling stations 24 hours before the elections next February 3rd. On Saturday, we started the municipalities with the second stage of the collection center of the polling stations. The third stage will be on the night of Sunday, February 3rd, the collection of these packages to bring them back to each municipal electoral board. And on Monday, February 4th, and at 7 in the morning, we begin to receive here to all the municipalities the packages in return together with the respective copies. The transfer of the electoral packages are under the supervision of the Attorney General Office, the Electoral Monitoring Board, and the Human Rights Office. The custody of the security of the electoral material is in charge of the National Civil Police. The operation is going to be distributed for the dough to the different polling stations that are in El Salvador in the different municipalities in each to put a distribution route. We will set security of 4 police elements to ensure that we'll reach its destination. The Supreme Electoral Tribunal claims that they are prepared at 100% of the presidential voting day. After a test process and drills, it's only necessary to refine certain difficulties in the transmission of the data. We have to fix some bugs that has been detected with some details still that they are mentioning, which are trying to correct yet the system, which basically is given by the issue of the transmission from the points that are located by the company that has been contracted. The electoral silence started this Thursday as mandated by Electoral Code. Another provision that must be fulfilled is a dry law, which prohibits the sale and consumption of alcoholic beverage 1 day before, during, and the day after the elections.
And international observers are in the country to monitor the process. Our correspondent Ernesto Avalos has more.
El Salvador Supreme Electoral Court has announced that 1,595 station polls are ready for Election Day. Most of them are located in schools where police forces have already been deployed. New measures have also been taken to avoid any technology attack by hackers against the official website of the Supreme Electoral Court. It has also been reported that over 1,400 national and international observers will monitor the process. Salvadorans living abroad have returned to the country to exercise their right to vote.
We thank Ernesto for that report. A powerful 6.6 magnitude earthquake has hit the southern region of Mexico. The tremors were felt in Mexico City by hundreds, but there were no reports of serious damage, injuries, or deaths. Authorities continue monitoring the situation. The earthquake was also felt in Guatemala and El Salvador. Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has arrived in Barbados for an official visit. Arreaza was welcomed by Prime Minister Mia Mottley. The two delegations are expected to revise their cooperation of bilateral agreements and discuss different ways to ensure peace in the Caribbean region. The 4th International Conference for the World's Balance concluded this Thursday in La Habana with the World Council Declaration of the International Solidarity José Martí Project. The document expresses deep concern about policies that promote conflicts, accelerate the armament race, and ignore multilateralism.
It's me great pleasure.
Intellectuals from around the world gathered in Havana for a 4-day conference to debate about the challenges Latin America and the Caribbean is facing as the region fights to keep its independence and peace. The event focused on the fight against the U.S. interventionism attempts.
I think that we have to work hard, following Fidel's advice about promoting ideas and awareness in our people. We have to do this, but now with the help of technology and new platforms. These are the platforms our enemies are using to spread lies and fake news. We have to use these platforms to spread the truth about what is happening, as too many people are confused about this.
The professor and member of Venezuela's National Constituent Assembly, Adán Chávez, talked about the U.S. intervention attempts in his country. He said Chávez supporters will not give up their fight to defend socialism, regardless the difficult circumstances.
We had to join against imperialism and for a better world. We had to follow the motto that has joined us here, together and for the good of all, convinced that we want a better world that can only be achieved through socialism.
The Fourth International Conference for World Balance coincided with the 166th anniversary of the birth of Cuban thinker José Martí. The historian Eusebio Leal says that Martí's ideas promote equality and balance among the people.
Martí's ideas came from his convictions and Christianity, from the love he spread. He said that in the hardest fights, we have to love justice and fight against our enemies.
The final declaration rejects interventionism against any country of the region, as well as rejection of any attempt to destabilize legitimate governments.
We want to reassure our solidarity with the Venezuelan people and its government. We reject any coup attempts pushed by Washington. Venezuela's domestic affairs should be solved by their people through dialogue, something that President Nicolas Maduro has asked for.
The declaration also rejects any attempts of political persecution, demands former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva to be freed, and congratulates Cuba on the 60th anniversary of the revolution.
Bolivian President Evo Morales has launched the International Year of Indigenous Languages at the UN headquarters in New York. The international seminar will showcase the world's ancient tongues and highlight the need to conserve them. Members of indigenous communities have attended the event. Morales will also meet with the UN Secretary General and the President of the General Assembly. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Authorities in Hong Kong have uncovered a massive endangered species smuggling operation out of Africa. Officials availed a record 8 tons of scales and 2 tons of ivory tusks, which were found in a container from Nigeria. They say the container was destined for Vietnam, disguised as frozen beef. The value of this sized goods is about $8 million. The East African Community Diplomacy Summit aimed at finding solutions to the Burundi crisis has kicked off in Tanzania. Delegates gathered in Arusha are expected to discuss regional security, trade, and adoption of the political confederation as a transitional model to the East African Political Federation. Leaders will also deliberate the possible admission of Somalia into the bloc. Women in Afghanistan fear that any peace deal between the Taliban and the U.S. could erode hard-won freedoms. In the nearly 2 decades since the Taliban lost power, rules that barred women from education and work have been chipped away. They fear that if the Taliban return to power, their rights will be eroded.
I think freedom for post-Taliban women is a big achievement, and if we once again go backwards, that will be a big step back and a very heavy price for us.
I won't accept a peace that asks me to go back and sit at home. I will raise my voice and never be ready to accept a peace that costs me my freedom, restricts me, makes me wear a burqa and puts me in a cage. I won't accept a peace that brings stability but puts me in jail.
A South African artist is using art and photography to reflect on her African heritage and to stress the importance of land reappropriation. The recent show of Sitembile Mtsesane that was held in the UK has strong themes on South Africa and Zimbabwean history. She emphasizes the importance of correcting colonial land distribution imbalances in the two countries. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.